Since I started urban sketching, I've picked up quite a few little tips. So here are some of them that I hope you might find useful too. These tips focus more on the practical side of urban sketching, not painting and drawing techniques. That'll be another video that I'm putting together, so watch out for that if that's something that you're interested in. First of all, materials. It's worth investing in decent materials. Avoid ultra cheap stuff. Your sketching's worth it. I know you can get away with some budget materials, but there is one particular thing I think you're better off just spending a little bit extra on, and I'll tell you what that is in a minute. Really cheap materials can ruin the whole sketching experience. But just because it's not a good idea to buy really cheap, nasty stuff doesn't mean you have to go to the other extreme and spend an absolute fortune. There are some things that you can get away with more budget-friendly options than others. Brushes, for example. I've been using these Fumui travel brushes for a couple of years now. I really like them and they don't break the bank. I've recently changed and started using something else, but I'll come on to that later. Student grade paints, for example, the Schminker Academy range and the Winsor & Newton Cotman range, perfectly acceptable in my opinion. In fact, they're the ones that I use when I go abroad and I don't want to risk taking something more expensive on a plane where it might get broken or lost. They don't have as much pigment as the professional range, but really they're ideal for starting. I'll put links up in the description to all the materials that I'm mentioning here. I prefer to use a fountain pen, but that's just personal choice. Fine liner's absolutely fine. Haha, excuse the pun. And they're pretty cheap. Just make sure you get water resistant ones if you're planning to put a wash over the top afterwards, otherwise you'll just get a big mess. But if you do want to try a fountain pen but don't want to break the bank, I recently bought a Platinum Preppy to take on holiday, again in case it got lost or broken. And I was really impressed with it. It cost about £6 in the UK, and I bought a pack of cartridges so you don't have the initial outlay of a whole bottle of ink. And you've got a perfectly good tool to start with. But what I think matters the most is the sketchbook. For years, I was absolutely put off painting because I just used cheap, horrible paper. I would literally take the paper out of a printer and use that. And then I wondered why my watercolour paintings looked absolutely terrible. As you can imagine, the thin paper just buckled and was terrible. So it is worth spending a little bit more in this area. But there's a fine line, because for me personally, if you go too expensive, it can have the reverse effect and you can be a bit scared to use it. I've certainly found that in the past. So something mid-range. I know everybody's mid-range is different, but I use CY to Brighton. The paper is 200 GSM, grams per square metre. While I would normally use something that's over 300 if I wanted good quality and 100% cotton, I find these sketchbooks, which are about £11 or £12 in the UK, I find that they take the water really well and they're not so expensive that I'm scared to use them. These are cold pressed, which means there's a bit of a tooth on the paper. And that's, again, a personal preference. There's an artist I follow on YouTube and I love her work and I love her style of sketches, and she uses a Hahnemühle Nostalgie. So I decided based on that I would try one, and I absolutely hate it. And there's nothing wrong with the sketchbook, there's nothing wrong with the Hahnemühle brand, but it's just too smooth. But that's just me. So you need to find what you like sketching on, whether you like a bit of tooth or whether you like it to be nice and smooth. But all is not lost, because it now means that I've got a sketchbook that I can just play with. I can just experiment with new techniques, new materials, and not worry about it. But this brings me on to point 2. Don't fear messing up. Your sketchbook is not going to be in an exhibition in a gallery. Just have fun with it. Use it as a playground. Experiment, make mistakes. This mindset allows you to improve much quicker. Point 3, always carry a pocket sketchbook. If you always carry a little sketchbook and a pen with you, you can just whip it out at times when you've got a few moments to spare. Maybe you're waiting for a bus or a train, you're in a waiting room, sitting in the car waiting for someone. It'll keep boredom at bay and hopefully improve your sketching too. And this brings me to point 4, sketch daily. Try and get into a daily sketching habit. Sketch of your coffee mug or a lamp on your table or the cars outside, even your own hand or a plant, or the view from your window. It still counts. This is actually one of my first ever sketches, and I just drew what was on the table in front of me. Combined with a pocket kit, this makes it easier to start and keep up a daily sketching habit. Point 5, keep a grab bag packed. Have a bag stocked, ready with all your essentials so that you can just get up and go out sketching at a moment's notice. If you've got to go around collecting pens, paints, clips, sketchbooks, you're bound to forget something, and I speak from experience here. But if you've got a little bag ready with everything in it, that means you can just go at the drop of the hat, and you're less likely to procrastinate and not bother to go out. If possible, keep duplicates or older supplies in the bag. Now, I know that's not particularly budget friendly when you're starting out, but at the very least, make sure you put your stuff away in the bag when you finish sketching at home. And as time goes on, you're bound to try some new paints or a new sketchbook. So when you do get duplicates, you can keep one set in the house and one set ready to go in a bag. While we're talking about equipment, that brings me to point 6, brushes. Now, I mentioned earlier that for a long time I've been using a Famui set of 3 travel brushes. I didn't really use the smallest one very often, but that's just because I've got quite a loose style. If you go down to more detail, you might find the smallest brush very useful. But I've only recently changed that because I've upgraded to an Escoda travel brush. And that's because I took the advice to get the biggest brush you can that still goes down to a fine point. And the Escoda does that. It's big enough to be able to do nice big wet washes for your sky, for example, but also comes down to a lovely point so you can still get in those finer details. This is a synthetic one that I'm using, and I did get it in a sale at Jackson's in the UK, and it wasn't terribly expensive. And now it's the only brush that I need to take with me. So if you only want to take one brush, I can highly recommend this one. Point 7, it doesn't have to be exact, it just has to be believable. We're not trying to be architects here. No one's going to sit in that exact spot where you sat and pick holes and say, well, that tree wasn't there, or that fence wasn't there, or that brick wall was higher. Urban sketching is about capturing the moment and a sense of place, not creating an architect's blueprint. Focus on the overall proportion and the character of what's in front of you rather than accuracy and precision. And that brings me on to my final and perhaps most important point: be kind to yourself. Remember that we are our own worst critics. When you look at one of your sketches, you will probably just see the faults. Other people won't see that. And if you think you've made a mistake, just learn from it and move on. Brush yourself off. Don't beat yourself up. Everyone makes sketches that they don't love. But treat so-called mistakes as learning processes, not failures. Progress comes from practice and persistence. Well, I hope that's been useful. And as I mentioned earlier, soon I'll be putting up a video with some of the tips that I've picked up that are more on the drawing and painting side. So watch out for that if it's something that you might find useful. Thanks for watching and happy sketching.